We start with a murder case that has shocked the Heights. A pregnant woman strangled to death, and police say her husband did it.
Court records show Gilly has discussed plans to flee to Mexico and other countries, as well as a detailed plan to remove his GPS monitor.
Christa loved Italy so much that I actually associated her with Italy.
These are new photos tonight showing Houston mother Christa Bauer on a girl's trip to Italy 2 years ago, just months before her husband is accused of strangling her to death at their home in the Heights.
The morning of May 6th, 2026, a bailiff walked into a Houston courtroom and called Lee Gilly's name. Once into the hallway, twice more, silence. The man charged with strangling his pregnant wife weeks away from a capital murder trial was not delayed. He was not unreachable. He was gone. And where authorities eventually found him tells you something about the scale of planning involved that no innocent person would ever need. But the escape is not where this story starts. And it is not even the most disturbing part. Because before Lee Gilly ever touched that ankle monitor, before he ever boarded a flight under someone else's name, there was a woman in San Diego he had been seeing since 2023. There were messages, sent across multiple platforms, detailed enough to end up in court documents. There was a plan written down in enough detail that prosecutors filed it publicly months before he used it. And there was a marriage that, according to everything documented in this case, had already collapsed from the inside long before Christa Gilley stopped breathing. This is not a case where the facts are thin. The question this story raises is not whether something happened, it's how long it had been building, and how many moments there were where the truth was almost visible before it finally became impossible to ignore. What hits you hardest about this one, leave that thought below, because people who have been following this case land in very different places. Subscribe if you're not already here, because we go this deep every single week. Now, here is the full story. Christa Bauer grew up in Summerville, South Carolina, the oldest of 4 daughters, described by people who knew her as a born nurturer with a magnetic personality. She was competitive, driven, someone who took everything seriously and excelled at most of it. She graduated from Clemson University with a degree in public health, then went on to earn a doctorate in physical therapy from the University of Pittsburgh. She became a board-certified clinical specialist in cardiovascular and pulmonary physical therapy. She worked as a traveling physical therapist for years before eventually landing what her family described as her dream job, a position at Memorial Hermann Hospital in the Texas Medical Center, where she cared for critically ill patients dealing with heart and lung complications. She was also an adjunct professor at both the University of Texas Medical Branch and the University of Pittsburgh. At the time of her death, she had been invited to speak at the American Physical Therapy Association's national conference, scheduled for February. She had built something real. Somewhere along the way, she also met Lee Gilly. They first crossed paths as seniors at Clemson, at a dance class, went on one date, and then went their separate ways for nearly a decade. They reconnected in Boston 8 years later. Lee flew from San Diego to Houston 11 months after that and surprised her with a proposal. They married at the Cathedral of John the Baptist in Charleston, South Carolina, in January 2017. They settled into a home on Alston Street in Houston's Heights neighborhood, a house they would own for more than 7 years. They had 2 children, Madeline in 2020 and Gannon in 2022. By the fall of 2024, Christa was pregnant again, 8 to 9 weeks along, expecting her 3rd child. The man who flew across the country to propose to her would later fly across the world under a forged Belgian passport to escape her murder trial. By October 2024, whatever was happening inside that marriage was not visible to most people on the outside. But the court record that would eventually be built around this case tells a different story, one with a timeline that goes back further than October 7th. In March of 2024, 7 months before Christa died, Lee Gilly posted on Reddit, publicly. He wrote that he was in a bored marriage and was looking for a college-aged woman for a friends with benefits arrangement. His wife was alive. His children were in that house. She would be pregnant within months. That post is in the court record. That Reddit post was not where his outside life began. Prosecutors identified a 2023 affair with a woman in San Diego, the same city Lee had moved away from when he flew to Houston to propose to Christa. That affair had been running the year before the pregnancy, and that woman would reappear in this story in ways that prosecutors say reveal exactly what kind of person Lee Gilly was when no one was watching. 2 days before Christa died on October 5th, 2024 witnesses observed Lee Gilly at a family party. He appeared distant and quiet in a way people noticed. The following day, October 6th, he made a derogatory comment about his own son in front of witnesses. He made a derogatory comment about another child to those same people. And then on October 7th, he and Christa had an argument. The subject of that argument was a 2025 Kia Telluride he had purchased without her knowledge or consent. They went to bed. 3 hours later, Lee Gilly called 911. He told the dispatcher his wife had overdosed, that she had tried to take her own life, that he found her unresponsive and was performing CPR. Paramedics arrived at the Alston Street home around 11:30 that night. Christa was transported to a nearby hospital. She was still alive when she arrived. She died from her injuries shortly after. And on the night she died, before any arrest, before any charge, before any autopsy, Lee Gilly told investigators, "Bad things happen to good people." He also said he was being set up. He said that on the night his wife died, when hospital physicians examined Christa's body, they noted bruising and trauma to her face and neck that did not align with anything her husband had described. The injuries were not consistent with a suicide attempt. They were not consistent with CPR. The medical examiner at the Harris County Institute of Forensic Sciences conducted the autopsy and ruled her death a homicide. Cause of death: compression of the neck. Manner: consistent with strangulation. The autopsy also confirmed she was pregnant. Court documents state that Lee Gilly intentionally caused Christa's death by applying pressure to her neck and upper back. In the days that followed, investigators questioned Gilly, and he admitted in his own words, on the record, that his wife was not suicidal, that she did not use drugs. He confirmed both of those things himself, which means when he told the 911 dispatcher she had overdosed, he was not confused. He was not in shock, making a wrong assumption. He described something he already knew was not possible. Lee Gilly was arrested on October 11th, 2024, 4 days after Christa died. He was charged with capital murder covering the deaths of both his wife and their unborn child. In Texas, that charge carries the possibility of the death penalty. The minimum outcome of a conviction is life without parole.
Well, the husband is currently in the Harris County Jail being held without a bond. Meanwhile, I spoke with coworkers of the victim who tell us she was a very kind and loving mother. 39-year-old Lee Gilly is charged with capital murder for allegedly killing his wife Christa Gilley last week at their home in the Heights on Alston Street. This is Gilly in probable cause court over the weekend.
Does that mean I'm getting a bond?
In an unusual back and forth, he asked the magistrate judge to grant him bond.
I'd like a bond today.
I understand that. I'm not setting a bond today.
The bond hearing that followed drew a sharp line between what prosecutors believed this case was and what the defense wanted the court to treat it as. Prosecutors pushed for $3 million. The defense argued for $200,000. The judge set it at $1 million.
Gilley's appearance was rather quick, but the judge did lay out a series of bond conditions. Topping the list, he will not be able to have any contact with his children if he does make bond. Gilly is accused of killing his wife, Christa Gilley, last Monday in the couple's Heights area home. Prosecutors say the children were in the home when Christa died. Authorities said Gilly called police at the time, saying his wife killed herself by overdosing and that he performed CPR. An autopsy later revealed she was 9 weeks pregnant and died by strangulation. It's not clear at this point if any drugs were found in her system.
Mr. Gilley is devastated. He's devastated at the untimely loss of his wife. We're working very hard to try to get to the bottom of what actually happened. There's a lot there's more that's unknown than what's known right now.
Gilley posted it and walked out on October 21, 2024, required to wear a GPS ankle monitor, surrender his passport, stay at least 200 feet from the family home, and have no contact with his children or Christa's family. Those were the conditions. That was the leash. And for a period of time, it appeared to be holding. But something else was already in motion. Because the day after Christa died, before any of those conditions existed, before the bond hearing, before the arrest, Lee Gilly was already talking about leaving. On October 8th, members of Christa's family's circle observed him making inconsistent statements and saying the situation was a setup, that he was being targeted, that he needed to take care of himself by leaving the country. By October 10th, 3 days after her death, he told people around him he planned to drive to South Carolina and leave on October 12th. When they tried to arrange a phone call so his children could speak with their maternal grandparents, he ordered them out of the house. The arrest on October 11th cut that plan short, but it did not cut the thinking behind it. What followed over the next year and a half was a pattern that only became fully visible in hindsight or in the pages of the court filings prosecutors built ahead of trial. During his time on bond, Gilley's defense made requests for him to travel. One attempt, to visit family in South Carolina for Thanksgiving, was denied. In early April 2026, a judge allowed a brief trip home to visit his mother, who was reported to be seriously ill. He was permitted to leave Texas, go to South Carolina, and return. He did. But at some point in that same general window, in the spring of 2025, something else was happening on his phone. Gilley had reconnected with the woman from the 2023 affair. They communicated across multiple apps and phone calls over a period of weeks. The content of those conversations, which prosecutors obtained and entered into the court record, was not personal in the way you might expect from two people who had been involved romantically. It was operational. Gilley told her he planned to flee. He discussed which countries he was considering, Mexico among them. He walked her through his method for removing the GPS ankle monitor in enough detail that prosecutors described it as a detailed plan. He discussed the idea of getting married as a way to legally change his identity. He asked her directly whether she had access to a Mexican identity he could use to get out of the country. All of that was in writing, sent across multiple platforms, documented, and in April 2026, prosecutors filed it publicly as part of their trial preparation notice of intent to introduce evidence of prior bad acts. The judge saw it. The defense saw it. Everyone in that courtroom knew that Lee Gilly had been mapping an exit while his trial was being scheduled around him. The trial was set to begin on June 5th, 2026. On the evening of May 1st, 2026, at 9:03 p.m., Lee Gilly's GPS ankle monitor generated a strap tamper alert. Pretrial services attempted to reach him by phone and instructed him to report for a device inspection. He never responded. Under the department's existing protocol, formal notification to the court would not happen until the next business day, Monday. That window, from Friday night to Monday morning, is what he used. By the time the FBI contacted prosecutor Lauren Bard on Monday afternoon, Gilly had already made it to Canada and boarded an Air Canada flight to Milan, Italy. He traveled under the name Lejeune Jean-Luc Olivier, presenting a Belgian passport and forged Belgian identification documents to border police at the Milan airport. How he got from Texas to Canada is not fully accounted for in the public record. The documents did not hold up. Italian border officials became suspicious and questioned him. At that point, Gilly dropped the name. He identified himself. He told them he was Lee Mongerson Gilly, that he was awaiting trial in Texas for the murder of his pregnant wife, that the charge carried the death penalty, and that he was seeking asylum on the grounds of wrongful prosecution. Italian authorities tried to send him back to Canada first, since the flight had originated there, but ultimately took him into immigration custody. The FBI office in Rome was alerted by Interpol. A federal criminal complaint was filed. interstate flight to avoid prosecution. His bail was revoked. A warrant was issued. And back in Houston, on the morning of his scheduled court appearance, a bailiff walked out into the hallway and called his name 3 times. To no one.
It is upsetting that this place that is so deeply connected with her would now be associated in this way.
Christa was proud of her Italian heritage and dreamed of getting dual citizenship. Her high school friend Cara Kelly says, but now it's where her alleged killer, Lee Gilly, is in immigration custody. Federal investigators say he cut off his ankle monitor while out on bond in Houston and fled to Italy using the name Lejeune Jean-Luc Olivier and forged Belgian travel documents. Now he's claimed asylum. Investigators searched his home again this week, seizing his SUV just weeks before his capital murder trial was scheduled to start.
There was kind of an end in sight. That's been moved again, and it's just destabilizing and awful.
The judge presiding over the case told pretrial services directly that the 24 to 48-hour notification window needed to change, that a capital murder defendant on $1 million bond cutting off an ankle monitor was not a situation that could wait until Monday. The Crime Stoppers representative who addressed the media was less measured. When someone on a capital charge removes their monitor, that call should happen immediately, not the next business day. There is a legal complication layered on top of the logistical one. Italy's extradition treaty with the United States prohibits the return of individuals who face the death penalty unless American prosecutors formally certify they are not seeking it. Gilley's defense attorney confirmed the prosecution had not pursued the death penalty in this case, but that certification still has to be provided to Italian authorities before extradition can formally begin. Add to that the unresolved question of whether Italy ever technically admitted Gilley to the country, since he was stopped at the border using fake documents, which affects whether he even falls under Italian jurisdiction in the way a standard extradition request would require. No one involved in the case has been able to give a clear answer on how long his return will take. The trial date of June 5th remains on the calendar. Christa's family released a statement through their attorney, Tim Ballingy. The Bauers, he said, were profoundly disappointed by the breakdown of the system. The family expected the defendant to remain in custody for the remainder of the proceedings and trusted the court would ensure he could never flee again. Gilley's defense attorney, Dick DeGuerin, who has represented defendants in some of the most high-profile criminal cases in Texas history, told the court he had not been able to reach his client. Gilley had sent him an email on the Sunday before his scheduled Monday appearance, but DeGuerin said he had not been able to make contact since. His advice, if he reached him, was to waive extradition and come back. His explanation for the flight was the same one he gave on record. His client was scared, not calculating, scared. The prosecution's position is the opposite. Every detail of the escape, the documented planning, the written communications with the affair partner, the fake Belgian identity, the route through Canada will be presented to the jury as evidence of consciousness of guilt. The argument is not complicated. Innocent people do not plan international escapes for a year, write them down across multiple platforms, and then execute them with forged documents weeks before a verdict. Here is where this case sits. Christa Bauer Gilley was a 38-year-old physical therapy specialist, a mother of 2 young children about to turn 2 and 4, 8 to 9 weeks pregnant with her third, scheduled to present at a national professional conference in February. She was found unresponsive in her home on the night of October 7th, 2024, after an argument about a car her husband bought without telling her. Her death was ruled a homicide by strangulation. Her husband told police she overdosed, confirmed himself she didn't use drugs and wasn't suicidal, said, "Bad things happen to good people," the night she died, talked about fleeing the country the morning after, was arrested, released on a $1 million bond, and spent the following year in documented communication with his affair partner, walking her through the details of an escape plan in writing across multiple apps, while requesting permission from a judge to travel to South Carolina for the holidays. Then he did it, under a forged Belgian identity, through Canada to Italy, weeks before a jury was supposed to hear the case. The defense says he was scared, that Christa died of a pre-existing medical condition, that the flight was panic, not premeditation. What the record already shows before any verdict, before any testimony, is that the man who flew from San Diego to Houston to propose to Christa Bauer, the man who stood with her at a cathedral in Charleston and made promises in front of everyone they knew, spent the 18 months between her death and his trial building a way to make sure those promises would never be accounted for in a courtroom. The only person who knows what happened in that house on Alston Street on the night of October 7th, 2024, is sitting in Italian immigration custody right now, waiting to find out if a country that abolished the death penalty will send him back to one that still has it on the table. If you've been following this case, or if this is the first time you're hearing it, share this with someone who needs to know about it. And if you have a theory about any part of this, the escape route, the affair, the argument that night, what was really happening in that marriage, the comments are right there. This case is still moving, and the next development could come any day.